Today we're going to build my brand new gaming PC, adding some much needed updates and refreshes to my motherboard and CPU, along with some new additions that will make content creation and live streaming much easier and simplify my workflow. Now, part of today's video is sponsored by Elgato. They have sent me out their brand new Elgato Capture Cards, both the 4K-X and also the 4K Pro. Both of these brand new capture cards are equipped with HDMI 2.1 support, providing some of the best compatibility in the market for both the PS5 and also Xbox Series X. The new Elgato 4K Pro is an internal capture card that you plug into a PCIe Express lane, and this can pass through up to 8K 60 FPS in HDR. It also has support for high refresh rate gaming, passing through 4K 240Hz, at which you can capture at 1080p 240 frames per second, or at up to 4K 60 frames per second, which makes it great for content creation and also live streaming. The new 4K-X is an external capture card, which is a convenient solution if you don't have a crazy gaming PC, and it can connect via USB Type-C to your PC, your laptop, or even your iPad for recording your gameplay. And it can capture up to 4K 144 frames per second or 4K 30 frames per second in HDR. Both of these capture cards are available right now, and I'll provide a link down below in the video description, and we'll talk more about these later on in the video. First, let's go ahead and actually prepare the case for the PC build, and I also want to tell you what the plan of attack is right here. So last year, I built the world's largest gaming PC. We made a video all about it where we built essentially a custom water-cooled system with two different computers inside of there for live streaming. So you had a live streaming PC and then a gaming PC. It was pretty complex. Now, I've been living with that PC for over a year now. I really enjoyed it. It's been good, but it's also been a little bit complicated. So you have to have both systems turned on at the same time because they've got like linked power supplies. And it's just a little bit frustrating when you just want to literally boot up the computer, quickly grab a file and then shut it down and head off and go do something else. In addition to this, it also draws an excessive amount of power. It's got all the custom water cooling, about 12 fans inside of it, loads of overkill hardware operating on there. So I want to sort of simplify my life and just go to a single PC setup rather than that dual PC setup that we previously had. Even just go to one monitor rather than multiple monitors on the desk and just streamline things so they operate a little bit simpler. Now, for the PC components that I'm actually going to run on this particular build, we're going to upgrade the motherboard because I do agree with the comments from my previous video. So this PC build right here is going to contain an AMD Ryzen 9 7900X CPU. Now, my current PC build with the RTX 4090 inside of it, the master PC is running a 5900X AMD build. Now, there's nothing wrong with that processor. Fundamentally, they're very similar in terms of threads and cores as this one right here, but obviously the architecture on it is slightly older, and everybody said that CPU would be bottlenecking my RTX 4090, which at the time I actually disagreed with, which I thought was completely correct to do so. But fast forward a year, I do now agree that that CPU is potentially bottlenecking the potential from that RTX 4090, predominantly because I recently did a video about the AMD 7800X 3D, and that has that 3D V cache memory inside of it. When I plugged my RTX 4090 into that system, my word, we were getting like, I'm not even joking, sometimes like 20 to 30 FPS more in some games. It was absolutely off scale, the additional performance. So that highlighted that that 5900X was sort of dating a little bit. And now fast forwarding another year sort of on top of that since building it, it definitely is showing its age. Now, this system isn't going to be used exclusively for gaming. If it was going to be used for gaming, I would, of course, go for a 7800X 3D CPU inside of this build. As I just mentioned, you get excessive gains because of that 3D V cache. This is actually going to be mainly a workstation/hybrid build for playing games on as well. So I'm actually going to go for the 7900X because it has much better workstation capabilities from this CPU processor for some of the video editing tasks and photo editing, Photoshop, different stuff that we want to use in that department. So I think this is more appropriate CPU to facilitate that because of its different cores and threads that it has got. And essentially it's the same style of CPU that we're currently running, just on the newer AMD 5 processor boards, and also it supports DDR5 RAM. Now, in regards to the RAM, we are going to level things up. Now, in the current PC build, I think it's 32 gigabytes of RAM off the top of my head in my current PC build. It's two 16 gigabyte sticks, which is cool. Pretty much fine with that. Now, right here, we've got DDR5 RAM, and I'm feeling flashy. So we're actually going to go for 64 gigabytes of RAM in this new build. I absolutely spec this thing out to a T. And we've got these little Corsair Dominator Platinum sticks right here. As a kid, these were always my favorite like RAM sticks. I always wanted these so badly. They had like platinum silver ones back in the day. I was like, I really want those. They were always super expensive. They're too expensive for me to buy. Whereas fast forward now that I'm a young adult, I've finally got these sticks. I bought these like around summer last year for some other builds, but we're going to throw these in this system, and they have met my expectations. I've got the cool RGB light effects on the top here that will be able to sort of sync up with the RGB lights on my GPU, and also potentially some of the fans that we'll put in here and create a little bit of a theme, because again, the current RAM sticks that I've got on the AMD 4 board with the 5900X, they're just some standard matte black T-Force RAM sticks that are really good, high-performing sticks, but they're not very fancy looking. So we're going to go flashy with these. I've also got them in this beautiful gunmetal grey to tie in with the Gigabyte motherboard that we've chosen here. I specifically got them all of this to sort of tie in with a bit of a stealth look with the overall build that we're going for here. Now, while we're on the topic of kind of storage, RAM sticks, temporary storage, let's actually talk about our real internal storage, which is going to be obviously NVMe SSD drives that are already housed inside of this motherboard. Now, I currently run a 1TB NVMe SSD as my boot drive in my master PC build at the moment. We're going to do the exact same here. We're going to run the same drive. I'm going to take it out of that build and put it into this build once it's all finished and basically ready to rock and roll. I'm going to have to keep that SSD in that build and GPU inside of there until we're ready to decommission it, because I need to use it for video editing and completing various different tasks while we are building out this new system. But already in preparation, I do have a boot drive inside of here from a previous video that is a 1 or 2 terabyte NVMe SSD drive that's got Windows 11 on side of there, so we can at least get it all set up and running, do some stress tests, and then finally put the storage inside of here. But something that is going to be different with this build. Now, in my main computer, because it's so huge, it's literally the world's largest PC case you can buy. It's a Corsair 1000D. According to Google, it's the biggest consumer case in the world, essentially. Now, that has loads of storage bays for hard drives and also SSDs. So it has over, I think it's like 32 terabytes or something ridiculous of internal storage, because we've got loads of hard drives inside of there and also a whole bunch of 4 terabyte SSDs, not NVMe SSDs, just the sort of old-fashioned ones from sort of like 2014, you know, the original SSDs, like first gen ones. They are just in the backdrop of the PC for backup of footage, storing all of our video footage, and obviously editing off of those. Now, on average, every single year, I usually fill around a single 112 terabyte hard drive with footage from all the videos that we create. So it's over 12,000 gigabytes of footage we fill out on a yearly basis. So that means we've got multiple hard drives inside of there. But the problem is, I'm getting so used to super fast SSDs, NVMe SSDs in particular, both obviously on the new next generation Xbox consoles and my PC builds. Those hard drives are just starting to basically irritate me. You go to boot something up or find a file that you haven't accessed for ages. It just takes so long. Whereas with this build, we're going to go for SSD storage only. Right here, I've got an eATX motherboard, so it's more orientated around pro workflows and professional systems, as well as a bit of gaming, obviously. But that will allow us to have up to 3 NVMe SSD drives under this bay right here. There's also one here for a Gen 5. So we can have multiple in here, and then even a Gen 5 SSD in the future once we get our hands on those. They're a little bit expensive at the moment, so I'm not buying one of them. And that will allow me to have basically a 1 to 2 terabyte boot drive, and then a bunch of 2 to 4 terabyte additional drives for editing off of. And then in the back of this case, we can throw some 4 terabyte standard SSD drives, and then I'll probably build out a NAS server with hard drives inside of it for just backing up all of our footage to more of a server style thing, and then that way I can access it more remotely. That's something that I've never built before, a NAS server. So if you have any experience on that, let me know in the comment section down below what your advice would be, or even send me a DM on Instagram. I'll put my @tag at benrowlands.uk. Drop me a message and tell me the best way of setting it up, because I have no idea really where to start with it, and I've been researching it for a couple of months now. So with most of that out the way, let's talk about the 2 final components that are going to go in this case, and that is the RTX 4090 GPU. That is currently in my master PC. It's pretty big. It should fit in this case, no problem at all. We've also got this excellent feature, which is a GPU holder, so it'll prevent it from sagging. Right now in the current system, it's sagging like crazy because it's such a big and heavy power supply, so that obviously puts unnecessary strain on the PCIe slot here, which stresses me out a little bit and causes a bit of anxiety. But this will prevent that from happening. So we've got this little bracket that we can adjust so it will support the graphics card and prevent it from basically breaking, especially if you're moving the case around a lot and you're rearranging your room quite frequently. It will reduce the stress load on there. And then furthermore, we're also going to be adding these Elgato Capture Cards. Now, these Elgato Capture Cards I've been running in my previous system. I've been running them for years and years now in all my computers. But they recently released a new one that's an internal PCIe capture card right here. That is a HDMI 2.1 capture card that allows for up to 8K 60 FPS pass-through. So you can play at 8K, pass that through even at HDR. And then, of course, you can capture at 4K 60 FPS HDR and also pass through up to, I think it's 4K 240 Hertz pass through. So you can play at high refresh rate gaming, pass that through the capture card unimpeded whilst also recording it directly onto your PC. There's also an external card right here, the 4KX, which works very well if you're like a console gamer. You can capture up to 4K 30 FPS on this thing, and you can plug it into your iPad or even into a laptop if you so desired to. So it's a much better solution if you don't have spare bays on your motherboard like we do right here, because we've got multiple different PCIe slots, so we can actually go for the internal card that's a little bit more powerful. So that's going to be an upgrade that we're going to do on this system. We're going to upgrade from the old version to the new version of the 4K Pro, and that's going to be much better for capturing gameplay on my Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S, and also my PS5s. So I think the most sensible thing would be to prepare the case and then put the components in later on. Now, this case is super cheap. It's the Phanteks NV5. You can pick it up for around $97, $99, but it has pro features like beyond belief. Like, it's got tempered glass side panels, got the GPU holder, like I said, it's got some built-in RGB light strips, but it's one of those sort of mid-range cases that has a lot of pro-end features. If you wanted to custom water cool this thing, it's got loads of mounting points for different radiators, pumps, got excessive amount of fan grills here. Basically, wherever you wanted to mount something, the options are there to do a simple sort of single loop setup. So it does have a lot of advanced features in that department, and for the price point, I think $99 for the build quality of this case is really good. And in traditional Phanteks fashion, it's got beautiful cable management with all the different cable ties provided straight out of the box, and also on the rear over here. And then at the top, you've got a nice little I/O with some Type-C connections, reset buttons, and so on. There is an additional RGB light package that you can purchase for this case that are just some additional attachments that click on. I haven't opted for that, might maybe add it in the future, but I think the included stuff is perfectly fine. You also get a nice little accessories box with this case that comes with all the screws you'll need for throwing the motherboard inside of there, and some nice little cable ties as well to get yourself going. Also, in today's video, I'm going to be using my new tech toolkit that's available on my YouTube shop. This is a little product that we're testing out. We've got very limited numbers of these currently in the warehouse. So as soon as they're sold out, that might be it. We might never stock them ever again. But currently, if it does work out, we might potentially order some more in. But this is a little toolkit that's got a beautiful little screwdriver, and then all of the screw heads that you may require for any of your tech endeavors. So of course, building a PC, you just really need a Phillips screwdriver or a flathead. You've got this nice little interchangeable thing that you can choose from with variable different sizes. But if you were taking something like an Xbox apart, that has proprietary screw heads on there to prevent you from accessing different elements of that device. So there's lots of different screw heads that allow you to bypass issues like that, especially when taking technology apart that the manufacturers don't really want you to. Furthermore, this screwdriver is super cool. It's got a little adjustable head on it, so you can make it long, you can make it nice and short, so you can get it into nice little crevices, and it's got a beautiful little storage box for placing all of your screws in as you go about doing your PC build, so we can throw them inside of here, which works much better than our current solution that we have, which are these mugs. I've got all of the screws just thrown inside of this mug for some past builds, but we could throw them inside of this little container to keep it all nice and safe. Right, so the first thing we're going to throw in is the power supply. This right here is one that I've used on previous builds, so it's got some of the connectors already in place. Now, this is a modular power supply. My favorite type of power supply, to be honest, is modular. You just basically attach the cables you need for powering up your system, and then you can leave the rest of them all blank, which just makes cable management just a little bit easier. Now, these are all currently connected, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw these in place. If you are building a PC, I recommend connecting the power supply stuff first. Then that way you don't have to put the power supply in and then try and align all the different connectors. You just throw them in and then slot it in. Now, obviously, this case has got a nice little pass-through for the power supply, but also interestingly, it's on a little bit of an angle, the power supply inside of this case. They've got like a bit of a style to it. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. Right, so that's sat in nicely there, but as I was saying, this power supply area is actually on an angle, and that's to increase the airflow inside of this case. So there's this nice little pass-through that's on a little bit of like a triangular slant, and then that allows more air to pass through here. Obviously got the dust filter, and then that can exhaust the hot air of the power supply out of here, which I'm a huge fan of. One of the main reasons why I chose this case was, although it has a lot of glass, tempered glass side panels, it did have very good airflow. There's lots of different regions on the case that maximize the airflow, especially if you like mostly air cooling your components and not putting them on any form of water. So that works nicely. Next, let's turn our attention to our CPU cooler. I've got an AIO over here, an all-in-one water cooler. This is one made by EK Blocks, water blocks. I've used this in a few different builds at this point now. Now, one thing I'm unsure about is RGB fans in this build. Obviously, I mentioned I wanted to go for that sort of stealth black, stealth gunmetal gray kind of vibe, and I don't know whether I want RGB fans in this system. So I've currently got some RGB fans on here, and we're gonna go ahead and put these in and we'll see how they look, because obviously we've got the tempered glass side panel, so we want to showcase some lighting off. But what I may potentially do is actually remove these in retrospect when I complete the build, if I don't really like the overall aesthetic of them. Main reason why I just don't really like RGB fans currently at the moment is the cable management on them. Obviously you've got your traditional fan head connectors that you've got to deal with, which is fine. But then these EK water block fans in particular are just an absolute mess when it comes to daisy chaining all of the RGB headers together so they can communicate with one another and obviously synchronize the lights with the CPU block, the lights on the fans, the lights on the motherboard. It's just a little bit of a pain, and I find it's just extra steps and faff for very little gain, because you don't really look at the RGB lights anyways. So I do have, as an alternative, some light gray and dark gray fans from Noctua that are very, very quiet, high-performing fans, but they just have a different vibe and aesthetic to them that we are going to be using in this build for both the intakes at the top and then an exhaust here. But then I might potentially pick up some additional ones to use on the radiator as well and just really go for a cool gray vibe overall. And the only RGB is on those light sticks, on the RAM sticks, and then also the GPU itself. Because this case has an unusual fan layout, we need to be quite specific about what we want to do. Now, traditionally on a PC case, you would have your intake fans on the front here blowing in cold air, and then you would have your exhaust fan at the rear blowing out the hot air. So you've got cool air coming into the case, cooling down the components. That air then gets hot and comes out of the case warm at the rear exhaust fan. Same as well, you might have some exhaust fans at the top. So you've got cool air coming in, and then the hot air, when it gets hot, goes out here and out at the back. Now, because this case has a bit of a weird layout, it's got a glass side panel on the front, we obviously can't have any intake fans coming in at the front here, so we have to do a bit of an inverted fan layout that isn't really the most optimal, but it's more aesthetically pleasing. So if we take a look at how a fan works, this right here is the front of the fan. So this is where it intakes the air, it captures the air and pushes it out the back of the fan right here. So this is the rear of the fan, the exhausting side. So obviously you would normally have these on the front like that, bringing in that cool air. Now, if you wanted to then intake the cool air through this side panel, which you really should, this is where the cool air would probably come in, it would mean you'd have to mount the fans the wrong way around, which looks super ugly. You see how you got the rear of the fan right here? Looks hideous. Got the rear of the fan, that'll bring the cool air in. It would then obviously hit this glass panel and then sort of bounce to the right. So you'd lose a little bit of air pressure, but it would do the job. But it's obviously going to look super duper ugly, so we're not going to roll with it that way. We're going to have the exhausts here. So we're going to have the fronts of the fans facing outward, whether that be with the RGB lights, so it looks super cool and sexy. But we'll basically have the front of the fans mounting outwards like this to then exhaust the hot air out of the rear side panel of the case. So that means we are going to have to mount these fans upside down on the top of the case to intake cool air. So we're going to intake cool air from the top, intake it in, it'll cool the components, and then it'll be sucked out via here. It's not optimal fan layout, but it has to have a nice balance between does the job, but also has a degree of aesthetics. Most of the motherboard is pre-prepared for us, as I have used these parts in a previous video. So all we've got to do is just go ahead and throw the RAM sticks into their designated slots just by simply basically aligning each end and just going ahead and clicking them in. And that's looking good. So now we'll go ahead and insert the motherboard into the case, and then we'll worry about adding our Elgato capture cards and our graphics cards once it's actually safely secured. So first I'm going to remove this bracket for the graphics card just to make sure it doesn't clash with the motherboard, because our motherboard is an ATX motherboard, so it's slightly longer than a normal board that you might throw in that's just ATX. So we'll get this out of the way and we can put it back in place later on in the video if we actually want to use it. The great thing about modern motherboards is the fact that the I/O plate is built into it. You see here, it covers up all the USB ports. Back in the day, this would be like a separate piece of metal that you would have to throw in yourself manually. Some cheaper motherboards still do have that, but for the most part, it's now built in, which just removes an extra step that you have to do. So we'll just sort of throw this in place and then move it around so it falls into position. I think that's looking pretty good. Make sure none of these cables are caught under the board so it sits flush. That's looking good, that. And then these ones down here, there's definitely a cable caught underneath. Yeah, there it is. Perfect, right? That's all them cables out the way. That's now sitting in place nicely. Yeah, it's latched into the little central column. Again, modern cases have a little central column in the middle of the case that protrudes out, that basically catches the motherboard and sits it perfectly in position. So that's now being caught. I can feel it, it's not moving at all. You see how it's clicked in. And now this all aligns with the screw ports. So we just need to grab the screws out of our provided little case here and throw them in. So I actually just suddenly thought with this PC that we could actually add 2 capture cards into it. Because we've got an eATX motherboard, which is more orientated around sort of the actual professional work tasks, the layout of the PCIe slots are much different to the gaming board that's in my old main master PC. The main problem with that, it's got loads of PCIe express lanes for connecting stuff in, but the issue is the graphics card's so big it covers half of them up, so I could only have the graphics card and 1 capture card in my last PC build, which is predominantly the main reason why we have 2 systems in that case, because we needed a capture PC as well with a different style of capture card in there, which is the Pro capture card that allows you to have like multiple cameras connected to 4 HDMI slots that Elgato also makes. Whereas with this, because the 2 PCIe lanes are at the bottom, the little slots are at the bottom, and these Elgato cards are just single slot cards, we can put them next to each other at the bottom of the motherboard. So right here, we'll be able to have our brand new 4K capture card with HDMI 2.1 for our console gameplay, PS5, Xbox. And then down here in this bottom lane just below it, we can put our other capture card that has all of the HDMI inputs, the 4 HDMI inputs for all of my cameras that we can connect directly into the PC. And then around at the back of the PC, we'll have this capture card and then a second capture card with the 4 HDMI ports, and then obviously the GPU located up here. It'll work fantastic. I wasn't actually expecting to do this on this PC build. I just suddenly thought when I was cable managing it there, I was like, hold on here, we've got a little bit of space. Because obviously this is the current PC build here, and you can see the issue. So we've got the Camlink 4K Pro inside of its own mini ITX PC build here. This is the capture card that I use for all of our HDMI inputs for the cameras that we use for filming videos, online courses, whatever it is that I need to capture. These all go into here. But then of course, we've got the main capture system for all of the gameplay stuff, which is the main PC here. This is obviously my main editing system, gaming system. It's got the RTX 4090 in it, but then it's also got the Elgato Capture Card just located right there, the old version of the card that we'll be replacing. But then you can see there's no PCIe lanes available. There is obviously underneath this huge GPU, but we couldn't then add any other capture cards than this, which is why we've got this second system to facilitate that. So my personal favorite thermal paste is Thermal Grizzly. This stuff is fantastic. It's really good as well if you're overclocking and you really want to push the voltages on your hardware. I like this stuff. It's super cheap. You can get it for like £5, £10 or whatever. Get a really big tube of it, and it lasts you your entire PC building career if you don't build them that frequently. But right here, we'll just put a little dot in the middle, nothing too crazy. That should probably be more than enough. And we'll throw the lid back on, and we can throw our CPU cooler in place. Also got to be careful. I don't want to get this on the Gucci, mate. Can't get it on my cardigan, a bit of thermal paste. We've then got these little screws that we just throw on top of those little poles that we put in place. And we'll finger tight these for now, and then I'll just give them a little crank with the screwdriver to even up the pressure on them, so that makes sure the thermal paste is evenly distributed across the CPU area. So before we throw our graphics card into place, let's go ahead and install our capture card. Now, if you don't know what a capture card is, this is basically a little device that allows you to record or stream gameplay coming from a HDMI console or like anything that outputs HDMI. So for example, you can capture your gameplay from your Xbox Series X or your PS5 straight into this capture card going into your PC, and it also has unbelievable pass-through capabilities up to 8K 60 FPS or 4K 240 Hz, so you could also capture another gaming PC through this capture device right here. And it allows you to record incredibly high quality gameplay, 4K 60 frames per second, or even live stream with this capture card with flawless experience. And then because it passes through the capture card, there's no latency or any delays introduced into your actual gaming experience, so you can still perform to a high level in all of your favorite games whilst capturing those moments and preserving them. Now, this is an internal capture card that is supported by PCIe, so we will occupy one of these slots in this motherboard, probably this one here, depending on how thick our GPU is actually going to be. And we'll just remove these little card slots and go ahead. And then we'll put the graphics card in once we have got this in, because obviously it's going to restrict the amount of space we have available once that graphics card is in place. So installation of this is incredibly easy. It's just essentially like a graphics card. You remove your PCIe cover slots here, and then you just align it up with the case and then throw it into the designated spot. And it should just literally click into place, and then we'll throw the little bolt in here, and it should just sit in there perfectly. And that is our capture card installed. Then from here, we'll go ahead and do the software installation, which is super straightforward. I'll talk you through that right now. Installation of the software for the Elgato Capture Cards is pretty straightforward. You head over to the website and install the 4K Capture utility. Inside of this software, you then have the option to select through the various different capture cards you may have connected. This could be in the form of the USB, 4KX, even the cam links for connecting cameras, or the actual capture cards that are inside of our PC. From here, inside of the capture utility, we can head into the settings, change the bitrate at which the gameplay is recorded at. This essentially is how high of a quality gameplay capture you have. And of course, the larger the bitrate, the larger the file will be. And it's very useful that it does a little estimate on the screen to tell you exactly what the file size would roughly be per hour of gameplay recorded. And then from here, you can then name and organize your capture into a particular folder on your PC. And then you simply just click the record button. This will then capture exactly what is being displayed out of your Xbox Series X, including the audio without any issues, straight onto the hard drive or SSD on your PC, which makes it very fast and easy to then throw this into video editing software and create a YouTube video and throw it up onto the internet. Of course, you can also use this capture card for live streaming. My personal favorite software is Streamlabs, but others are available, such as OBS, which is completely free, and it will work exactly the same. It will input all of the gameplay into your PC, and then you can stream that out onto your favorite platforms. Now, I accidentally made a mistake when building my PC today. I thought I could have two capture cards running inside of this system, but unfortunately my motherboard isn't fast enough to have two Elgato capture cards running at the same time. The Elgato capture cards require a PCIe Express lane that is 4x as a minimum, so 4x, 8x, or 16x, it's all compatible. Unfortunately, this Gigabyte motherboard only has one 4x lane, and then that second one at the bottom is a 2x lane, so it isn't quick enough for that second capture card. So I'll have to purchase a different motherboard and switch this out in the future if I actually want to run this setup. But for now, I'm just going to run this little USB 4K cam link for connecting my DLSR into my PC as my stream camera or content capture card for when I want to record any video. So this is the final build that we have completed in today's video. Currently, I still have the RTX 3080 Ti inside of this case. Unfortunately, I still can't remove my RTX 4090 out of my master PC because I am still using that for some work that is still incomplete. But overall, I'm very happy with the PC that we've built. It's much easier to use than that dual system that we had in the previous case. And its performance both on gaming and also for content creation, capturing all of my gameplay, is absolutely fantastic and facilitates all of my needs and requirements on a day-to-day basis. Now, if you want to see my video from last year where I did build the world's largest gaming PC and custom water-cooled a system for the first ever time, you should check out this video next. But as always, I've been Ben Rowlands. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.